Here's the full interview with Ben Reid. When we filmed it, we covered so much more that can go in the episode. It's warts and all, a bit rough and ready, but I hope it helps. I'm now going to chat to my friend Ben Reid. I've known Ben since 2011. We're both part of New Community Church down Southampton. During that time, we together introduced the role of an MD. We introduced click tracks, both for events and now they're Sunday mornings. And for some of the big conferences, we even managed to run tracks. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much, Dave. It's fun being part of this conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, well, I think it's an important conversation that we're going to have. How are you doing during this lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, it is such a strange time. I think everyone's caught in the balance of, realistically, it's a real tragedy and it's affecting people in a very real way. On the other hand, there are a lot of benefits to be found, and a lot of people have more time at home and are reevaluating what they do with that time. And personally, I would say that there's so much going on online with respect to people keeping connected. So I'm part of so many things that are either, small church groups and, daily prayer groups, all of those kinds of things. So in actual fact, I feel maybe even more connected than I usually do, even though we don't see people all in the same room, if you like. So yeah, I think people are finding that kind of mix of emotions, really, that it is a very odd time. It is tough. There are also good things to be had from it.
That is great. I know I've certainly kept in touch a lot better with a lot of people. It kind of hit the nail on the head on why I thought we'd chat. I was chatting to another friend of ours, Lee Button, at the weekend, and he was saying what they were hearing through their Thinking Church network was that a lot of small churches are struggling to get worship recorded and understanding how streaming works. Now, you, myself, and the third person, Mike Powell, who's the worship leader at New Community, we've collaborated quite a bit on things. We've played in your function bands and all sorts. So I thought between us we'd take on a bit of a challenge where we would see how close we could get to some of the big church productions without really spending any money.
Great.
And without really going for like ultra high production values of that, and see how close we can get using free software.
Yeah.
We own. And that's the idea, really. But it's made me think about a few little questions. So,
yeah.
You obviously are well used to being a music director. We managed to introduce that 2015 to New Community.
Yeah.
How is that working during this time of lockdown and slightly distanced recording where everyone does everything separately rather than come together? Are you part of a conversation with the worship team in how arrangements go together, in terms of song selection, in people developing parts?
Yeah. So I think to start with, I mean, a lot of people might not even know what a musical director does in ordinary circumstances, which is obviously something that you and I and Mikey Powell and those guys, we kind of like figured out for ourselves as we went along. And I think one of the misconceptions is like, am I the one that's actually leading worship? It's like, no, I'm not. What I'm trying to do is, communicate with the worship leader and help deliver that with the band. So very often the worship leader will give directions, but it's helpful for the musical director or MD just to use a whisper mic or shout mic or whatever you call it, wherever you are, just to make sure that the band are all moving to the same place at the same time. And it's funny, you're talking about introducing click to the team and stuff like that. When we first did that, I can remember, as soon as we did that, I had people coming up to me and saying, "Oh, something's changed. It was just so good today. What changed?" And it was that we were using click. So, everyone had that reference point. All the songs were at the right speed right from the beginning. So yeah, it's important to remember why we do what we do. It's not to appear professional or slick in a worship setting. It's the worship leader is doing his or her thing, and as a band we're trying to support that in the best way possible. And I always think of it like, if it's like lyrics and songwriting. If you've got lyrics that are really special, you want to learn the craft of songwriting to kind of frame that picture as best you can. If you've got a worship leader any worship leader, when you're leading worship, you want your band to be with you. You don't want there to be any disagreement on whether you're building or dropping, or it's always like first beat of the bridge. Are we all actually playing the beginning of the bridge? So it's good to have a musical director just to kind of tie that stuff together. Okay, so on to the the more kind of online aspects now that we're not meeting together as teams in churches. I think the first thing to recognize is it's a different thing. Let's call it almost like a live in a studio thing. If you're leading worship live in a church, you have all kinds of things that you've never really thought of before. You've got the warmth of the room, whatever it is, because you're coming through real speakers and the air is moving, and that feels different. And you might not realize it, but there might be fluctuations of tempo, but you're probably in quite a forgiving room, and no one will quite, that won't be a distraction. That won't be a problem for people. And when we're in this new format of leading people who are most likely going to be in their living rooms, or maybe even logged into their church service on a laptop or something like that, you're dealing with a different environment. You're not dealing with big speakers. The air isn't moving. It's probably a less forgiving environment. So if you've got one person playing out of time with another band member, that's probably going to be more noticeable, more distracting, and it's almost like you're stepping into a studio skill rather than a live skill. So some of the things that we've learned along the way is it's really good to have not only it's good to have an MD audio track as people are recording, because if you're there at home recording your part for the service coming up, it's really useful if the musical director is saying, and we're building, we're going to stop on 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there you go. And then it's almost like you're in the same room, because when you put all those videos together, everyone's done the same thing at the same time. Everyone's building in the right place, everyone's dropping in the right place, everyone's moving from section to section of the song in the same place.
Let's jump in there. So does that mean, let's say it's Mikey who's leading on a Sunday? Are you and him in touch in the week? Does he give an indication of songs and structures, and together you get those MD parts down? And I think it leads nicely into the second question, which is what's the biggest challenge that you faced right now?
Okay, so again, the difference between what happens normally and what's happening now is that for a lot of the big things that we've done, like BBC Songs of Praise and Live on BBC One, and all the the annual conferences that you've done with us. Ordinarily, Mikey will be leading, or Mikey and a combination of other people will be leading, and I will have the MD mic. So yeah, Mikey will have spent a lot of time with me previously saying, this is the plan, this is what we want, and I not so much follow the script, because we like to have a lot of spontaneity as well, but I know what he's aiming for, I know what one of the other leaders is aiming for, and as I say, I try and deliver that in the moment. So rather than and as well with our team, and I love our team, again, we're in contact every day, because it goes from Mikey to the drummer to the bass player to the guitarist to the keyboard player, so we're all discussing things as we go along, and there were some levels of detail that we actually decided not to go for, because there's got to be a balance on what's real and what's achievable, and we are in this context, we're not pros, and I'm really, really pleased with the result, because everything that we've done so far really, really does feel like our family, our community, and where we are reflects that really well. Now, the reason I talk about process is the way so in normal circumstances, I run everything off Ableton. So there's a tempo for every song, and Mikey will signal to me when to change the click for the next song, because everything is seamless transitions. There's never a hard stop between one song and another. And that was the problem. How does he spend time with me? Building that beforehand, and what happens to the MD guide, and in actual fact, by me doing a little bit of training with Mikey, he does all of that his end. So he'd never used Ableton before, so he had to download either like the free version or a trial version or whatever, and over FaceTime and stuff, I literally showed him how to build a set, how to use the tracks, how to change from one song to another. So everything gets done from his end. So he runs the click, and then he does the set, and then afterwards he records the MD guide, and then, as I say, it goes to the drums, to the bass, to the guitar, to the keys, which is cool. So we've done it that way because it suits us, and I think what has been interesting for us is that because that role is new to Mikey, he's got I've given him feedback on that, and other people have given him feedback on that, because sometimes when you've got an MD saying now that doesn't work, that's too late. So Mikey is having to kind of like upskill in that particular area, because he's never had that role. So he's had to kind of like draw on the experience of myself and others by saying, okay, well, you have to build those cues in earlier and say, this is coming up, it's going to happen on this beat, and then you count into that beat, and that's how you deliver it.
So you're very much using this time as like a time of training almost, and upskilling people like Mikey in how to be an MD. And I guess that on the opposite side, he'll get an even greater understanding of the role of an MD and how it all goes together.
Yeah, absolutely. And referring to your question of what are some of the challenges, I know we're probably going to trial some of these things, but as you say, for me actually it's a period of training people, which I find really, really fun. I think it's probably 6 or 7 people now that have either wanted to record at home or lead worship from home, and that has led to conversations of let's look at everything you have. You need one new cable, or you need this one bit of hardware, And then the things like I did a worship collaboration with one worship leader, and to get him started, he was just doing a 3-song set. He sent it to me, and then I put all the other parts on it, and got a backing vocalist involved to record on it as well. Now that was really, really challenging because he wasn't using a click track, and he was completely free. So the tempo kind of fluctuated a great deal, which then took me a lot of time because I had to learn that 3-song set really well to know when he was going to speed up and slow down. So part of that process, again, I've entered into a period of training with him so I can say, okay, click is a bit challenging for him, but we can set up loops and drum beats so that, he's not going to use Ableton, but he uses an app that displays his chord sheet. You can attach a song to each page. So, we can record a loop that lasts for 4 or 5 minutes, attach it to that one song. So everything he plays will be perfectly in time. It feels very natural to him because he's playing along to a loop, not a click. And then when he swipes so that he goes on to the next song, the next drum beat comes in his ears, and then everything that he records on that song will also be perfectly in time. So sometimes it is a little bit bespoke, and to find where people are at before, and in conversations that I've had with you, Dave, you had this brilliant thing, which is, something that is a step up rather than a jump up, which I think summarizes a lot of what we try and do is to take someone just a little bit further towards where they want to go.
Well, I think that makes it really interesting because obviously you and I have played together in your function bands, and you've always been able to take more risks with those, in that you're able to lay down the law and just be like, we're doing tracks, we're doing clicks,
yeah
things. But you and I wouldn't quite call it a battle, but obviously when I started doing stuff with some of the bigger churches, and you see click and you see track and you see MD used, you and I have chatted. You've been able to process it into your context, and then you've been able to deploy it, which it has been step by step to get to the point where a couple of years ago you started using tracks. I still don't think you use them that regularly. I think it's quite a thing, but MD and click have stuck. So the big thing, and part of this is, I've chatted to the multi-tracks people, guys. They've got their living room sessions, which are designed to help like some of the churches out during this time with slightly more stripped back arrangements. But have you guys been using tracks during this lockdown period, or have you been creating things quite organically?
I think that's an excellent conversation to be had as to introducing things to teams and using click and tracks, and often it has been a discussion with different churches, and as sometimes people are very resistant to that, and one of the things to be said is that very often a worship leader is like, yeah, but I really want to slow it down or whatever. And so, well, often the effect that you're going for is really reduced dynamics. And I've been using click for well over 10 years. And I found that actually, because the click is doing your timekeeping for you, it's not like the drummer's hi-hat or ride or the acoustic guitars rhythmic strumming, because that's doing the timekeeping for you. You can get incredibly sparse with your dynamics, so you can have pads and vocals and nothing else, or even just vocals on their own, and it's this wonderful sense of incredible range in your dynamics, because you can now go from super quiet to, you know, the band in, and, you know, at a really big dynamic. So it doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, churches using tracks. I find Click a very, I absolutely love Click. I absolutely love it. You know, particularly the confidence when you're starting a new song, particularly those songs that start with a lead line or something like that. You know, the confidence it gives you that you're playing it at absolutely the right speed. Because we've probably all been part of those experiences where it's just way too fast or way too slow, and you have to kind of wrestle it to the right tempo before the congregation starts singing. So I find it a useful tool for that. And it also has to be said that, you know, tracks aren't for everyone. You know, like some, and I think Multitracks has done an amazing thing with the new format that they've brought out, because if you've got one or two people leading worship, you actually don't want it to sound like a huge production with, you know, 4 synth parts, 8 guitar parts, you know, all you know, the you know, full drum kit part, as well as you know, percussion samples, all of that, because it just kind of looks and feels wrong. You know, there's the disparity between what you can see and what you can hear. So something that's stripped back is really, really good. So in our the way we do things on our team, we haven't actually used tracks, and I would say we're very, very fortunate, just because we've got a big worship team. Most of us have been on the team for quite a number of years, and the only reason I say that is that we're very used to how we work together on that team.
Playing together.
Yes. Yeah. So because particularly because I've been working with Mikey for a long time, I tend to know very quickly what he wants, and he has a really good relationship with the drummers, so that when he's describing something, you know, the drummers know how to respond. So I would say that we're very, very fortunate that we've got a really, really strong and talented team. I would say that certainly either if, and not only that, all of us are very used to home recording, and you know, that technology isn't overwhelming or intimidating. I think for any smaller church, or a church that is kind of struggling in this kind of online only format, I think tracks are going to be a wonderful addition, because it puts less pressure on the volunteers, probably, that are trying to put something together for the times of worship. I'm not talking about competition, because it's like, you know, I don't think we really should be going, oh yeah, but this church over here is doing this and it's incredible. Well, that's that church over there. You've got to have something that's real and authentic and feels like you.
Yeah, but I guess there are equally times where if you take a bigger song, it doesn't, you know, is really engaging with your congregation, and it doesn't necessarily translate to just an acoustic. There are going to be times where just a little loop, like you mentioned before, or a little something, just adds a bit to it. And I think
absolutely,
you know, and then we've spoken before about actually when you go down this track route, things are quite rigid structurally.
Yeah.
How do you get around that?
Well, the one more thing to add before we move there is that I think tracks are amazing for just giving you a little bit of confidence in what you're doing sound wise. I think if I were to do a set on my own, where I'm the only person leading and playing, I love setting up loops and things like that, just to bolster the sound, as well, because you've got to remember that the people who are going to be worshipping in their living rooms or wherever they are at home, you know, all those kind of rhythmic elements really, really help them to to feel comfortable and to be confident in their own singing as well. So yeah, new question. How is that you?
It was me.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's this thing of how do you get around a rigid structure on your worship tracks. And again, I think you need to just decide what you want out of it and develop a process to deliver that. So as I say, in our own context, Mikey can actually be fairly free and spontaneous because he's just working for the click correct for each song. So as far as structure goes, he can absolutely do what he likes and how he feels. I think if I were leading a set on my own, I might do it like that. And then if I was using a track to bring in all the other elements that I felt were appropriate for that song, I'm sure that that most of that structure would be the same as probably something that you'd get from multi-tracks up to a point. And if I started being a little bit more spontaneous, probably towards the end of the song, then I would chop up the track accordingly. So yeah, I'm not sure what your suggestion is going to be with that, Dave, because I've used a free program called Audacity, where you can see the sound waves very, very easily, and with a little bit of know-how, you can chop out a section and repeat it and move it around and all the rest of it. I'm not sure everyone would like to give that a go. Maybe that's part of a further conversation.
Yeah, I think those types of programs aren't necessarily designed for that. I know I use Logic myself. I know for me, part of this challenge is going, we're going to use some different software.
Yeah.
All of us, but it's free, and we're going to look at what can be done with it.
Yeah.
I know if it were me in Logic, if I know the tempo of a song, I can put that tempo in. I will then put the multi-tracks in, so they're there,
yeah.
and it all goes to a grid. So therefore, I can create markers. If I want to chop the click or whatever at a certain point, I can chop exactly and know that it's going to be cut in the right point. But that is a cost. I think Logic's currently like 150 quid on the Apple App Store. It's only Apple that. So you have a minimum level there to get into. We're not
I think
that. We're thinking about trying to get a bit general with everything.
Yeah. So I think with most pieces of hardware, like small keyboards and things like that, you get a light version of Ableton, which I know you can do a lot of different things with a lot of bits of software. I absolutely love Ableton. It's absolutely brilliant at all this kind of stuff. It's a non-linear digital audio workstation, in which case it's designed like you've got all your different parts of your song, and it's non-linear in that you can actually put them together in whatever order you want. So I'd really encourage people to get on the learning curve with Ableton, because it's just once you develop your workflow a little bit, it's pretty much immediate. You can put things together exactly how you want them.
Yeah. So does that help you get around your rigidity issues?
Rigidity, yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah. So again, not in the context with New Community, because we follow Mikey's structure, but for something that I'm doing myself, absolutely. I'll just put the different song sections into Ableton, and then I'll trigger them as I go.
That is amazing. Well, Ben, I'm super glad you're up to this challenge. I'm pretty sure it's going to stretch all of us in a few different ways. I know that both you and Mikey use Logic too, or your preference is Ableton. So going into something completely different and getting a head around it and seeing what can be achieved, not necessarily for us, but for others, is going to be a big thing. Um, Thank you. I will be taking some things over.
Before we go, the I think with this kind of thing, very often, we're there'll be something that comes up that you think, I didn't think of that, and you learn how to fix that one thing and you move on. And I think one of the most important things that we've come across is that particularly when using phone audio and phone video and stuff like that, just the simple thing of a clap at not only at the beginning but also at the end of your videos. So the way we do it, Mikey will just say, here are the claps of the videos, here's mine, here's the drums. So the person who then puts the videos together actually has those audio and visual markers. And at some other point we'll talk about frame rate in video and stuff like that. So if you have a clap at the end as well, that really helps. And there are a few other tips and tricks that we've come up with along the way. But as I say, that's part of building a process that's appropriate for your own team.
A couple of days after we filmed these interviews, Ben Reid sent me some extra videos, which are here.
Dave, I know we spoke earlier, but just finished up a project that is really relevant to what we were talking about in terms of being a musical director. I think the main issue that we have is if we're doing live worship in a room, we pick up a lot of visual cues and gestures and eye contact and things like that. So we might see the worship leader hold his guitar up for the last time round, something like that, or the backing vocalists might sort themselves out. You take the upper harmony, I'll take the lower harmony, all that kind of thing. So when we're doing remote sessions, it's a lot harder to get around that kind of thing. So the project that I've just finished involved two different backing vocalists and a cellist who was recording three separate parts. So in a way that I wouldn't normally do with my home team, I have to look at the overview of the whole thing. Firstly, write out the parts for the cellist so that all the harmonies stack in the right places, and with the backing vocalists, it's helpful if you have a little bit of prior knowledge with the range that certain vocalists have, so I can give it to the person with the lowest range first, so that they have the harmony that sits just above the lead vocal, and then from there, once that's recorded, send that on to the second backing vocalist. As well, it gives me a chance to have a look at an overview of the entire worship set. It allows me to be a little bit more creative in the arrangement, bearing in mind that people are going to be at home. As we've said before, they're not in a nice big room. They're not feeling the air move. They're not picking up from the atmosphere with lots of people around them. So if the instrumentation and orchestration is the same from the very beginning to the end of the set, maybe we can be a little bit more creative with that. So with this set that we've just done, I decided that we would only have the cellist in the first song out of three, because I just felt like the mood that was set by the worship leader really lent itself to that really kind of acoustic vibe, and because we were stacking layers, it turns into a sound of a string section. I also decided only to put the second backing vocalist in the third piece, and also I decided only to have drums in the last piece. So there's a little bit of framework there from beginning to end of the set. It means that the people that I'm working with can get their part back to me quite quickly, because a few of them are only in one song, so that's really good. And for the congregation, split up as it is in their own homes, hopefully that becomes like a cohesive time of worship that actually has some variety, and you know, I love using different people because, you know, people bring something of themselves into their worship. So being able to call on different people and have that kind of variety in a set is really good for the congregation too. Another thing that I found really useful is whether it's myself or Mikey doing the MD track, if there are any little interludes either between a verse and a chorus, or coming out of a bridge, or even in between songs, it's really good when you're putting the MD together to tell the band what chords you're going to. Because if you're worship leading and you're just moving from chord to chord quite freely, this way of doing things actually gives us an opportunity to be really in sync with that kind of thing. So a couple of the sessions I've done, like all the way through, I'll just be going chord 1, chord 4, chord 6, chord 5. So it's good if your musicians already know natural numbers, because that's just the easiest way of doing it. But again, if you know about your team that they need something else, then you can say C, F, A minor, G. But it's a really nice way of counteracting that thing again, where you might be an instrumentalist at home, and you might feel a little bit blind as to where the worship leader is going. That's one way around that problem.